All right, welcome to a free solution. I'm Kevin Wilson today, joined by Tim the Freedom Variant O'Connor.
I'm here, Kevin. This is awesome. It's the snowpocalypse in
The
central New
snow
York.
apocalypse. Yeah. How many feet of snow did you get, Tim?
I think we got about
Actually, please give it
10.
to me in meters.
Yeah, nope.
No. She's
Nope.
like, no.
Nope. I refuse to use the metric system. We're at about 10 inches now, I guess. It finally started kind of blowing around, so that's
Yeah.
it's hard to tell. Really, it was. I suspect it's not what they anticipated. We literally had the Weather Channel here.
Did,
The
did,
Weather
did you get,
Channel,
who's that guy? Jim Cantori?
not Cantori, the number two guy. I forget his name. I
Okay.
don't care. He was down drinking at the Novelty, doing lives out in front of it. Novelty's the Oneana strip club.
There you go.
The one, the only, the well-known, world-renowned Novelty
Oh, well, all right.
bar and grill, mind you.
Now I know what to visit in town. Good.
You do.
Yeah.
Everybody stops at the Novelty.
Yeah. No, so we'll talk about the snow a little bit on the show, but most of the show we're going to talk about the Silicon Valley Bank situation and the bailouts, well, bailout-ish type of situation, and
Bailout-ish. Yeah.
yeah, and whether or not that is a good idea, and if we should do more of it or less of it or whatever. So we'd
Yeah.
love to hear from y'all on that. How do you feel about the situation? What things do we need to talk about? So all you folks listening online, make sure you leave your comments. I see Shelly already in here this evening. Hey Shelly, good evening. Shelly on YouTube. But if you have any comments on this, any things that we ought to be talking about, leave them in the comments. We'll get to them, and maybe we'll get to a couple other things too. I don't think we ended up talking about like the New York bail reform changes, that type of stuff. So maybe we could talk about a little bit of that, or
Okay.
proposed changes, and then I know you had a story about the American drone hitting a Russian jet.
Yeah. True. It's man. Oh man, things are heating up over there.
Yeah, so we'll talk about all that. So we're gonna go live in a I don't know what 20 seconds, and again, leave your comments. We're gonna do the radio show. We're gonna do our thing. Y'all know how it goes, and I'm gonna try not to cough into the mic. That's what I'm gonna do today. It's my goal. All right,
Good luck with
we're
that.
live in 3.
Now, an hour of clarity for exhausted people of our nation mired in toxic partisanship. Left versus right, us versus them. While we pay to keep our politicians fighting, how do we, the people, rise up and solve the great challenges of our time? We do it by embracing freedom and liberty. There may be no such thing as a free lunch, but this hour is as close as it gets. Welcome to A Free Solution.
All right, welcome to A Free Solution. I'm Kevin Wilson today, joined by Tim the Freedom Variant O'Connor.
My freedom is severely restricted by the snowmageddon here in central New York, Kevin. Even though somehow we managed to keep power, so far, so good. It's been an epic snowstorm.
Thanks. I, for one, give credit to our competent New York State government for taking care of us.
Well, honestly, there were so many linemen in our area that brought here that the lines wouldn't have even had a chance to hit the ground. Those guys would have been there
ready,
catching those lines and snapping them back into place. I did ask the question on my page. Some of you might have seen it about who pays for this preemptive, hey, we might lose power kind of thing. Where does the money come from to put several? I saw at least 100 trucks at 2 different hotels in central New York, Otsego County. Who pays for that? And is it is that going to justify NYSEG raising the rates?
Right. It's the utilities, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, the answer is you pay for it with the service that you pay for, right? Like ultimately it's like that. You got to use their service unless you're off the grid, and and that's the tough dilemma, right? Like, do you do that and potentially put all these folks up in hotels and not need them, waste the money essentially, or do you fail to do that and then lines go down and then you have no power for 5 days and it's the middle of a snowstorm, right? People are trying to avoid what happened in Buffalo because
Right.
they're
Which
worried it was going to be like that.
so there's parts of it that I understand. This is the first time I've seen such a preemptive action on this kind of scale taken. So I think that again we go to things like how the government handled COVID, and now is this hurry up and panic kind of thing going to be the way that the government steps in, promises us safety, doesn't really deliver it, and our lives just get continuously more expensive with less economic freedom. That's my
Yeah.
concern because
Well, again, what I think is happening. Again, folks, if you're listening on WYSL, first of all, thank you for listening. And second of all, like we're recording this Tuesday night, so if you're like, man, why are you still talking about that snowstorm? That's why, because it's still happening now.
yeah,
When we're recording this, of course, we're live for our Facebook and YouTube and Twitter audiences on Tuesday evening, but this broadcast on WYSL Thursday evening. But to get back to like what you're saying is, I think that there are going to get less criticism for spending money to be prepared than they would if they could have put in extra effort and something goes wrong and part of a community is without power for a little bit. And they're trying to avoid that. They know that the embarrassment of not doing it is a lot more costly, and not just the embarrassment too of it's also like if a community is without power and someone freezes to death, that's kind of on them. So they'd rather, for better or worse,
no,
take precaution and spend the money.
yeah, it's just it's got to be millions of dollars that they spent,
Yeah.
and I think
And
that the payoff is not what they were hoping for. Though, first of all, thanks to the guys and girls that did it, right? Like it doesn't matter that they're making $100 an hour, that they're sacrificing time with their family. They've probably been on the road a lot this year. They got called to come. There's sort of a voluntary agreement that has to happen. Like they have to say, yes, I'll go. So a lot of people took the time to help prevent what could have been a disaster. Right at this point, right now, looks like we got through it. Looks like we're in pretty good shape. We still got a few more hours of snow falling. The weather's still a little bit iffy.
I
But
mean,
like
like,
kudos to them. Don't get me wrong. It's not,
yeah,
I'm not bitter. It's just a bizarre to this old dude. It's kind of a bizarre way to spend money.
yeah. And, I'll say this too, and we'll get to this comment that's relevant to this. It's like when I lived down in Georgia, right near Florida too, people would say that whatever 20 years ago that was now about like hurricane evacuations, like, oh, was this all really necessary? Did they need to make us leave? Do we need to spend the money to get people down here to repair services when like it ended up missing? And again, the answer is the same then as it is now, and it's that like, well, they'd rather do that than catch flack for stuff going wrong because they weren't ready. That's the argument for again, it sometimes ends up being wasteful, but I get why the incentive is to over prepare, to overspend, to overemphasize safety, because the consequences of doing that are relatively slim. It's just two libertarian podcasters whining about them compared to like what goes wrong if you
Yeah,
venture too far in the other direction. And
absolutely. It's good to be prepared. It's a big deal. I get it.
yeah, and I'll get to this comment from Justice. I never remember a government getting so excited about a snowstorm 10 years ago. It's such a current thing along with everything else going on with society. We used to have foot snow all the time in no state of emergency. Is very weird stuff, and I don't think it's necessary. Tim is right. Also, keep in mind that they were Democrats back down too, and I'm not sure what the change is, but we had Democrats. I mean, yeah, it's the same party too. I don't think it's like a political thing. I think it's I think it's the thing that I said is that like now they don't want to face 2 weeks of like social media and traditional media pressure when something goes wrong like that narrative sticks around a lot longer, and people blame the government for their failure to do something, and it is a change in mindset, right? Like
That's a good
maybe
point.
like 30-40 years ago the mindset would be like, you personally need to prepare your family for this snowstorm and the consequences of what's going to happen. And now the mindset's a bit different. If something goes wrong, if people die, even if it's in part the consequences of their own action, but sometimes it isn't. It's like a utility failure or just a catastrophic accident associated with weather. People are likely to look to their county executives, to their mayors, to their governors, and then say, "Why didn't you prevent this?" Right? And that's the change of mindset. It's like the government needs to be here to like mitigate this situation and help.
It is a change in mindset. We were somewhat separated from the government, and we didn't view. I feel like the government feels like it's able to control the weather or at least respond to the weather better. And maybe it's because of the Weather Channel and social media and like what you're saying, this constant narrative of criticism, which I even offered some, right? Like it seemed like a lot of money to put out there for a big fat maybe. And the history shows us that these things we have this tendency now to overreact to things. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't react, right? Like there should be an appreciable amount of caution set forth. Precaution, I guess, would be the better word. But I don't know. It still is. I get it.
And again, I'm gonna sound like less and less libertarian in this though. But like, there's also like in Rochester, New York, for all the absolutely valid criticism of the city and county governments, most of the time, the main roads in the city are like pretty well plowed. Like side streets, less so. But I'll you might even be able to hear it in the background. Plow's going to pass my house like every like 15 minutes. Right?
Yeah,
Some of it's sticking a little bit, but the reason the roads are clear is because they're putting a bunch of money because they know that if there's snow on the road and it's there for too long, people are going to complain. They're going to remember that. Like they don't really remember the like the absence of the thing. Like, oh, like this is normal. They're not thinking about it, but they will remember if like the roads don't get plowed for 2 days in Rochester because like we'll get 8 inches of snow and like everyone goes to work still.
Sure.
But yeah, if it stays on the road for too long, people are going to remember like, wow, how did the mayor screw this up so bad? Like we used to do things better here. There's the incentive to like overdo it.
Yeah, no, libertarians have the solutions for that though. Like if I owned all the power lines and my little power generating company in my neighborhood, I'd be on the hook to my people and be accountable for them, right?
Right.
So sure, what we did is a good response. Yes, we don't have the ideal libertarian situation. If I owned the roads in my neighborhood, my neighbors would hold me accountable for taking care of the roads. And either I'd get the job again or I would lose the job based on my performance or price, right? Like they could say, well, we're willing to trade some performance for price and yada, yada, yada. Like we have solutions to it that people don't want to buy into. So we can sound as unlibertarian as we want to when we're criticizing or appreciating the actions of our government. We're responding to what we have. Does that make sense?
It does make sense.
Yeah.
But I'll get it. Like on a related note, like I hate the sidewalk plows in the city of Rochester. Now they do pay a bunch of money for them, but like what they end up doing is they get stuck in front of my house and they dump a whole bunch of snow in front of my neighbor's house. And in like half in my driveway, which is awesome. And then my nice clean sidewalks will now have like 4 inches of packed down ice on them. It's amazing every time, just like undoing all my hard work. But it's one of those things.
That's a thing. I plow my driveway and then 20 minutes later, that's when the plow goes through and dumps it all right back in behind my cars. And plus I plow my neighbor's driveway and like, that plow, I mean, snowblower, really. I have a tiny little snowblower. So, I get it. Believe me, I get it.
It's the thing. But like a lot of people, they like that service, the one to pay for that service. I don't like that. The one time, I've said this on the show before, the one time I like brought it up to the people who manage that service, like, hey, could you just like maybe ask them to do it a little bit better, maybe lower it a little bit. And try not to dump all the stuff in my neighbor's driveway, like in my driveway, like that's not great. And it makes it hard for people to walk in my neighborhood. And also, could you plow the park next to my house because no one ever clears that and it's impassable. And they're like, well, we hire private contractors to do it. They're going to do what they're going to do. I'm like, well, who hires them? Oh, we do. What? Could you ask them to do better and maybe say you're not going to pay them again if they don't fix it?
That's not.
We have no control over that because we're not employees. I'm like, what? Yes, you do. You can tell them that. Come on, have you not engaged in commerce before? Like, have you never done this for? Nope.
That's
I knew the
actually,
answer before it came out of my mouth. I knew.
yeah, no, there is a big point of people in government thinking that they know how to interact with contractors and subcontractors, and it really is. It's a good gig to contract from the government. I'll be honest with you.
Yeah, but anyway, I don't think we really intended to spend this much time talking about the
No,
snowstorm. But it is what it is. It's like a thing that's going to be. We haven't had any snowstorms to talk about these types of issues. At least not
that's
too
true.
much in my area. I don't think your area's gotten a lot either. But
We've been lucky this year. It's been a great year. This is the snowiest like weather we've had all year. So I don't
yeah,
know. I like
I
it, but
yeah.
it. We have big things happening in the world, though, Kevin. Big, huge, monstrous things like banks imploding. Okay, like big, huge, monstrous problems that are going to drag us all into the dirt and wipe us all out. It's literally going to collapse the entire banking system, ruin the world, and plunge us into the deepest, darkest recession since the 1920s. Is that? Maybe I'm overstating it. I don't know. What do you think?
I mean, that's so you might be veering into panic territory
I
with
like panic.
that
Panic is
description.
good.
The
Makes me
everything's
feel
on fire. The government's got us, Tim. Don't worry. The government has taken care of us. Everything's great.
good.
You've got nothing to worry about. There's
I
people from the government are here and they're here to help.
That does not make me feel any better. I'm actually now slightly more panicked. I was kind of acting before. Now I'm slightly more panicked, to be honest with you.
All right.
That doesn't work for me. It is an interesting conundrum. This is the third big, huge bank meltdown of my lifetime. We had the savings and loan crisis back in the 70s, 80s. It actually prevented the smartest Bush brother from running for president. Like had it worked out better, had it not been such a scam, okay, what the savings and loans did with people's money, that guy would have been the junior Bush president, Neil Bush. And I mean, he was kind of an Epstein type guy, so maybe that would have hurt him too back then. But
You'd hope so, but
yeah,
I don't know.
he was a
But
bad dude. He got caught doing some other stuff, but the whole SNL crisis was pretty bad.
yeah, so savings and loan stuff. Then of course the 2008 Great Recession. So
The greatest recession ever.
yeah, now millennials' first recession. So I was in college, so it wasn't that I was exactly immune from it, but at least I wasn't trying to find a job then.
It was a tough gig. Like as a contractor, right? I was killing it, right? Like we were making money, we were having a hard time keeping up. Local businesses were flourishing. We were able to find employees. We were able to hire kids out of school, pay them a good amount of money to go to work. And then really it took until 2009. And then it was like, smash, like that imploded. So the banks had
Yeah.
imploded. Then our business imploded. And I wouldn't even say imploded like we survived, but the dynamics of bidding
Right.
on jobs changed. The dynamics of having available work changed. It was okay. I don't know. I survived that.
Yeah, sure. And Steve Becker has his .com bust too. I guess that's the thing. Not less of a bank crisis, but it is there are some rhymes with what's going on with the current thing with the Silicon Valley Bank,
Yeah,
because it's all tied up in investments in the tech sector and tech sector business holdings, right? Like they're basically their cash for their business. A lot of them are using this bank,
yeah,
and it's also it is tied up with inflation too. So we're gonna talk about all that. We still have a couple minutes left, so we'll kind of just introduce the topic now, and then
yeah.
we'll dive into what we're gonna do.
Lots of
So
things.
go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, Kevin. Lots of things happened, right? Like there's lots of things that made this come to bear. I like the fact that you put inflation on the table because that's one area where we're going to go. Hearing a lot of jibber jabber discussion about whether if you had more than $250,000 in that bank, you ought to just get your deposits. You put them at risk. It's your own problem. You lose them. I don't know. I think we'll explore that topic after the
Yeah,
break.
no, so yeah, we're gonna talk about like some of that, like what do we do about it? So just the quick recap, if you haven't heard about it by now, that the bank, Silicon Valley Bank, had run into some trouble last week. They were starting to see that because of some investments that they had made, is that they couldn't cover like the amount of deposits that they felt that they needed to cover, and also the federal government felt that they needed to cover. So they tried to do to raise some assets, to raise some capital to be able to cover the amount of the deposits that already existed. And in doing so, some folks caught wind of this. Like I think Peter Thiel was one of them, and like some of the other folks, like a bunch of like venture capital folks, were like, "Oh my goodness, they're out of money. They don't have the money. Go get your stuff out of this bank now. You're gonna lose all of it." So kind of
Mhm.
caused a run on the bank,
There was a
right?
run on that bank for
Yeah, and
sure.
so everyone, like, people suddenly got told, like, "Oh, we're gonna lose this money." And if you're a business too, like, you can't exactly blame them for it. Like the panic of like, I'm not going to be able to make payroll. And on Friday, like a lot of companies weren't. They couldn't pull their money out of the bank. They couldn't pay their employees. They couldn't pay their vendors. It's a serious and terrifying thing if you're a business owner. And because a lot of people had done that. And so because of that, because of the run on the bank, the federal government shut them down and started initiating a bank takeover. And so I think, was it HSBC was the one who ended up taking over, but like a bunch of stuff happens when that happens. Basically, they come in at Friday at the end of the day with the plan to like have a resolution of some sort by Monday of like some other bank's going to take over, or they're going to sell off assets of the bank to be able to cover the deposits and make the bank sustainable again. There's a industry term for that. I don't remember what it is, but
Yada yada
to
yada. It's
yeah.
gibberish, meaning they're going to cover their butts.
Yeah,
That's
right. So like, yeah, the federal government can like at some point in time just decide like for some of these banks, there's some like there's stories coming out of, like 2008 that I saw people posting about again, where like some of these like smaller community banks would just, most of the folks at the bank would think everything's fine, and then Friday at 4:30, 4:45, some guys show up and they're like, "Hey, no one leave. Everyone's staying here. We're taking you over. You can help if you want. We'll pay you for the help, but your bank's closing." And it's being taken over by this other guy. Here's the CEO. Here's the new CEO of the bank. They're taking over, and Monday morning you're opening up as that bank.
yeah, yeah, that
It's
happened.
yeah,
And it kind of happened here, except for now the government owns those banks right at the moment.
yeah, and so yeah, like, and again in this case, it's like the government kind of makes the bank do a bunch of things to be able to cover that, because that's what the mandate of like the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation is to try to make sure that your money is safe. It's created after the Great Depression. So we'll go into a little bit more of that and go into some of the solutions when we get back. Thanks again for joining us here on A Free Solution. We're going to be back in just a few minutes. Talk to you soon. And we're out for that segment.
Yeah, I got to get better helping you at understanding the times. I apologize. Like I could have helped you riff there a little bit, but I wasn't quite sure, and I knew you were watching the
Oh,
time.
you're right. No, we're good. It's a lot. Either way, it's a lot easier doing it with two of us than when I was doing those shows solo. And I'm like,
I
oh man, I've got like
couldn't
8
even
minutes
do it.
left, and I ran out of stuff to talk about. What am I gonna do?
Yeah, I couldn't even do it, man. It freaked me right out. Like that flop sweat would start, and I'd just be like, "Oh, bleh, bleh, bleh. All right, let's read some Joe Biden tweets for 22 seconds or something." Like
Yeah, right.
whatever. It was tough for me. Not in
Speaking of
my
reading
wheelhouse.
stuff, though, we'll get this a couple of these other comments. That no flannel shirt, Kevin from John on YouTube. No, I actually forgot it. I left it on my chair. I was gonna wear a flannel shirt. That's my usual uniform.
Yep.
But nope, I left it on a chair downstairs, and gonna have to go without it. My standard look. I've apparently established a brand. Um,
Flannel Kevin, they call you in some
that's it.
circles.
Yeah, I think having the beard now helps with that. Um, we could talk about this a little bit later. Shelly on YouTube's
Yes.
asking about the Fed being a private entity. Yeah, we'll definitely talk about that and the Fed's role in this and like what they do in terms of like in this type of situation is mostly about providing like liquidity, right? Like they give them I'm trying to think studied economics. There's like basically they give them cash, right? Like it's a loan. They'll provide like loans to the banks to have the cash to be able to make ends meet. And it's
Right.
not like they're giving them money. It's more like base interest rate loans, like the overnight rate loans. But even if you're getting those, if all of your other like assets that are supposed to be making you money are making 1.5%, and the Fed's loaning you stuff at 6%, now you got to work.
Right.
Not long term.
No, it's we'll get into it for the show. We'll try to keep it interesting. It gets a little dry, I think.
We'll make it exciting.
We will.
Yeah. So this all happened because of daylight savings time.
I agree.
Yeah, that's it.
I'm off
that's the whole
because
reason.
Yeah, I'm off. Like it's earlier now though. It's really only 8:30, so we got that going for us.
Yeah, that's true. And as Larry Sharp said on the show today, bring back Glass-Steagall. Glass-Steagall. I don't know. I don't know about that. I'll have to listen to Larry's show and kind of see what he said about that. I don't know that bringing back more regulation is necessarily what would have solved this problem.
What regulations would have prevented this? I think that what happened here is, and we'll talk about more, but like the implosion of their asset values, right? Like first they tried to heavily invest in treasury bills. Okay.
Yeah.
They were looking pretty good,
Yeah.
The massive inflation. We'll save it for the show. The massive.
Yeah. So we'll talk about that because we should talk about what exactly what John followed up with the comment says: savings loans separate from investment banks, right?
Right.
And so we'll talk about that and whether or not that should be a thing. And that's certainly a proposal that people are making, but there's different risks in that. And usually when people are making that proposal, they're not doing what I assume Larry's doing of just saying like, let's separate these out again. It's more, let's separate these out and guarantee higher amounts of money and introduce even more regulation to restrict banks' ability to be able to make money. And they're always going to make money. They're just going to find new ways to do it. Which is what always happens.
Wormholes, but yeah, go ahead.
Well, I want to save some of this for the show.
Yeah, I know.
Without going too much further into it, but we'll definitely get to that question, and and some of this other stuff in here too. So we're gonna go back in about 10 seconds. Welcome back to A Free Solution. I'm Kevin Wilson, your host for today, joined by Tim, the Freedom Varian O'Connor.
I'm here, Kevin, and we're having a blast. You and I are gonna solve the problems of this banking crisis. Probably. I mean, we're gonna talk about what really happened first, and it's go woke, get broke. Wait.
Oh wait, that's
get woke, go broke. That's what happened.
Get woke, go broke. Is that what happened? Tell me about it. Tell me why.
Well, basically what happened is, and I'm gonna derivate from the narrative, okay? What happened basically, guys, is that SVB was a bank that had assets on the books that were absolutely crushed by the current situation of rapidly rising interest rates, okay? They bought U.S. Treasury bills, and that is purportedly one of the safest investments of all, right?
A lot of times it is.
Yeah, well, when you're raising interest rates, the value of your U.S. Treasury bills drops precipitously. It drops rapidly. It drops fast. And then when you try to sell them all at once to kind of raise up your reserve holdings in your bank, it's a fire sale, man. And the sharks come in, they circle the waters, and they're looking for blood. What do you think? Is that a fair analogy?
Nope. That's a good recollection of what happened here and a fair analogy.
Okay. Thank you, Kevin. I feel much better now. I was like, my economics degree, in fact, coming in handy at least once in my life.
Yeah. And we're getting comments about like the 6% inflation, right? Like, so I just commented like, yeah, a lot of times Treasury bills like they can be all right, right? Like they can be a fairly safe asset. But if you bought them at a lower interest rate, and now like the interest rate you're getting for those is essentially losing your money, which is what happened here, 1.5% interest rate. If you bought those 7% like 10-year bonds like that they were doing last year, like that, it would be a little bit different, right? But in this case, yeah, 1.5%. It seems safe at the time, but ends up not being safe when inflation happens. And again, remember why inflation happened. It's mostly because the government spent just boatloads of money. So this is in part
They
caused
gave it
by
away, man. Like that, people, libertarians and some conservatives, right? Were saying this is not how you manage an economy. This is not. This is going to create problems down the road. This is going to blow up the inflation rate. This is going to be a huge, huge mess. The people that are going to get punished are poor people in the middle class, and everybody's just like, oh, this is fine. Everything's fine. Don't worry about it, guys. This is great. Like my kid had a $50 a week part-time job. All of a sudden now, under like COVID response, is making $600 a week unemployment. Like this, there was no screening. There was irresponsible distribution of money and trillions and trillions of dollars just thrown around. Like, here you go. Here, airlines, you need some money. Here, car guys, you need some money. Here, kids who have part-time jobs, you need money. Here you go. Multiple times amounts of money than they were actually making when they were working, right? So that all has the problem of devaluing our currency. Okay, when fiat currency, when the Fed says just moving decimal points and saying, yeah, we can make this loan, yeah, we can make this loan, yeah, we can make this loan, let's get this money out there. Okay, we have to save the economy. What they did, in fact, is erode the value of money. 6% inflation, 8% inflation, 10% inflation.
Yeah. And
That's
then
what got
related
you.
to that, and then we'll talk about the Fed too, is that like they raised their interest rates, which they're trying to control inflation, but like that can end up causing other problems specific to the banking industry too. And but I do want to get to this comment. Patricia Marie on Facebook says, "Safe government." Again, the Treasury bonds, they're safe because people assume that government is going to eventually buy them back. Now,
They will.
they will until they don't, right? Like
Until
until
they don't.
suddenly they don't. Like that's they're safe until they're not. That's
Right.
and unfortunately that's how a lot of assets go too. But so they can be safe, but they might suddenly not be.
It's an amazing situation, right? Because they have a time frame, right? They're still tradable in the time frame, but they have an expiration date. So let's say it's a 10-year T-bill, right? The
Yeah.
government is not buying it back for the face value of that piece of paper until the 10-year date comes up. People will trade them, and they can make money off of the spread, and they can buy them and sell them at lower and higher. But when they're on your balance sheet as an asset and the interest rate goes up, the value of the bond automatically goes down. That's how they calculate the interest rate. Okay. So when SVB tried to cash out, it was a big problem.
Yeah. All right. So let's get to a couple of things. So one, let's talk about the policy stuff related to this first. Like what are they going to do? What normally happens, right? Again, like the federal government comes in, they basically buy these banks that they think are going to fail, right? And they say, okay, we're going to do X, Y, and Z. And in this case, the federal government took I think they called it extraordinary action. They
Yeah,
had a
they
whole
did.
Zoom meeting with Congress too, and
Mhm.
they announced the actions on two banks, SVB being one of them, but said that they were going to guarantee the deposits of folks in this bank. So if you don't know, the FDIC, Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, so an entity created by the government in the Great Depression to try to prevent runs on banks and try to make sure that if you had thousands of dollars in life savings in your bank and your bank suddenly closes because they are mismanaging funds or whatever, you don't lose your savings,
Right.
right? So, and that tries to prevent runs on banks and give some sense of security to say that like for average individuals, your family money in a savings or checking account, like that's going to be fine. Now the problem with this bank is they were mostly doing commercial stuff, right? So a lot of what they did was hold money for companies, some like VC money in the venture capital money, sometimes just like operating cash for businesses. And for some of these businesses that, have thousands and thousands of people, that might be hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars, well
Per week.
above that. What's that?
Per week. Sorry, I meant to
Per
jump in
week,
there.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, like, so just
these
just
are
tons of money coming in and out of this, right?
yeah,
Like, huge operating accounts. And so you're doing that and you're, making the assumption that like, this bank's probably fine. I'm not going to suddenly find myself like they're taking care of my money. I'm not going to suddenly find myself unable to access that money. And you kind of take for granted that, it's not really there, because banks don't just hold on to your money when you put it there. They do stuff with it, like buy 1.5% interest rate bonds.
yeah.
They try to make money off of your money, and so that's what
They
they
loan it
do, right?
out, right? They
Yeah, they
loan it
loan it
out.
out. They do different stuff with it. That's the fractional reserve banking, and so it's not really there. And so now a lot of these businesses again suddenly faced with like, we thought this money was like it. We know it's not there. We know conceptually it's not there, but it's there. Suddenly it's
Right.
gone, right? And so now, if the kind of argument in favor of going beyond the $250,000 normal coverage for this type of incident is that hundreds, maybe thousands of businesses would close, at least like in the immediate effect of this, because suddenly now all their operating cash, they have hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars in losses just out of nowhere, might not be able to pay their employees, might not be able to keep their lights on. And so those businesses are going to close. And then the businesses that depend on those businesses would close. And there might be a cascading effect of businesses closing and banks closing for similar reasons. So they were trying to prevent the cascade effect of that happening. That's the argument in favor of doing what Congress did. Just similar to the actions taken in 2008. Different circumstances, but similar arguments, like we've got to stop the cascade.
Yeah, so look, these guys know the law. They know what the FDIC limits are. They put their money in a situation where it was at risk for whatever reason. Perhaps they were getting a little bit of a rate of return. Like, let's say they had a $500,000 payroll account, okay, and they were getting a 1% rate of return. Shouldn't they take some responsibility for what their risk that they did? Shouldn't they have managed their money better?
Yeah, I mean that's part of the argument, right? It's like, maybe we shouldn't be taking for granted that that money's at risk when it's with these institutions.
Yeah, I was actually being a little facetious there, Kevin, because I if I had a big business and I had a bank, like I would trust them. I would feel obligated to trust them, and like you have to have a relationship with your bank. So
Yeah,
at
I mean
what
you
point?
could do the I don't want to say crazy thing, but maybe the work intensive thing and keep it all in separate banks, only $250,000 in each account, but
Yeah, it's that I think we're setting ourselves up for an impossibility. And what we have to keep in mind is that there's a lot of people like behind those numbers that are getting paid. It's like
yeah,
certainly an investing guy with $1 million, maybe we could take a look, $1 billion sitting in that bank for whatever reason. Maybe we could take a look at that guy taking a hit for
yeah.
taking a higher risk. But any active business account somehow needs to be made whole. Don't am I crazy? I know like
No, I
we
mean, look,
definitely
that's
see.
certainly a lot of people agree with you. Like a lot of people
Yeah,
do think like that the business account should be made whole, that they shouldn't be responsible for this. So I'll say kind of two things about this. One is, so like it kind of seems like you're in favor of this.
yeah.
Two, we'll keep in mind that I'm going to assume you're going to be against this dude. The investors, like the stockholders of the bank, the executives, they're all still going to have a different level of accountability. They're going to lose all their stuff, right?
I
Except for
hope
the
so.
ones who like sold their assets right before all this happened. In which
They've
case,
handed out bonuses.
they're they're probably going to face a different sort of consequence, I would
I
assume.
hope they make some effort to reclaim some of those bonuses. This was something that happened back in 2008 too, where the JP Morgans get bailed out in the world, and they make the next quarter they're paying out $100,000 bonuses to their top 350 executives. It just
Yeah,
it
gross.
kind of like it's skeevy. It's skeevy. It's inappropriate.
Mhm.
They failed, and they need to be held accountable on some level.
Yeah.
Somebody's got to.
But I do want to like make a little bit of a counter argument. I'll read a tweet from Justin Mashtu. It said a bailout creates a moral hazard, even if it's just a bailout of depositors at a bank. It doesn't fix, but instead exacerbates the systematic problem. And the public is always on the hook for any Fed program, no matter how much government insists. Costs won't be borne by taxpayers. And again, they're saying that like this is all through FDIC collected funds and like fees collected by the FDIC and all this stuff, right? Like it's they pay for all this stuff, so it's now just instead of doing $250,000 of towards that fee, it's those fees are going towards a higher amount. But do you think that there is a moral hazard here? Do you think that this allows banks to be more reckless with depositor money because there's no risk of them actually losing and being held accountable for that depositor money above $250,000? Does it in the same way that the bailouts kind of include made or at least like incentivize recklessness, socialize the risk of risky investments while still privatizing profits? Doesn't this sort of do the same thing?
It sure does, and it sure did. Okay, it's an absolute moral hazard, and it's an absolute issue that we as a society never ever face appropriately. That doesn't mean that there's still not a separation there. Like the moral hazard of the actions of the people in the bank, they're the ones that need to be held accountable for the actions that they took. The actions of being a good faith depositor with SVB, who is doing whatever business and you're running your payroll through them. That's the part that I'm terrified about. You're running your payroll, your taxes, and things like that through them. What's your moral hazard? You did your job. You have an obligation to your people.
Mm-hmm.
Should you be limited to $250,000 in that situation?
Well, so let me present it this way. Should the federal government be the one to ensure that? Could there be a private market for insurance for banks above $250,000?
Well, now that's actually the libertarian solution, isn't it? I like so
Yeah.
should there be a more effective insurance program, right? And what's this arbitrary limit of $250,000 set by the government? Okay, yeah, no, I do like how they're saying the federal government's got this, guys. It's not going to cost you a penny. But it's like, okay, no one believes that for sure, you know.
Yeah.
I like how you're framing the argument though, and it does makes the case that it's not more regulation but more privatization that would make the case, and that like ISO 9002, guys. I don't know if you're familiar with any of the construction industry standards, but it's a company that certifies certain things about certain companies that their production meets certain standards. Why wouldn't an insurance company do that in cooperation with a bank? And
I mean,
then we
they're
could all
doing
be
risk
like,
evaluations all the time. They're good at it.
yeah.
They know about it. But so that being said, we'll talk a little bit more about like this policy and some other solutions that we had, like the comments from John on YouTube too about Glass-Steagall. So we'll talk about that stuff as well. Thanks again for joining us here on A Free Solution. We're going to be back in just a few minutes. Talk to you soon. All right. And speaking of bailouts,
Yeah, bailouts out, guys.
Yeah. So I did make sure, please give us a bailout too. If because I know some people have asked, how do you support the show? Like, what do you guys do? Like, we don't make any money off of this. We pay to have the show on the radio show and to pay for the streaming services and all this. We don't, we have a couple sponsors, but it's not like we're getting rich off this. But we pay out of pocket to do this. If you do want to support the show and help make it easier for us to do that and to reach new audiences, there's a link right there. Support the show. It's and we were on Anchor. It got moved over, bought by Spotify. So it's that long link there, podcasters.spotify.com/pod/show/a free solution/support.
Yeah, and I think that's something you made a point I want to emphasize, that you and I would be willing to do this more often, B, kind of compete better in the radio market, because what happened to our show when we were doing really well on the radio, somebody came in and bought our time. And we really couldn't offer an effective competition to them. Not that we need to per se, but it would be nice to be like, hey, let's spend some of this money on reaching more people. And I think that would make the show more fun.
Yep. So yeah, that's what it is. So if you like what you hear, you want to support the show, there's some one-time options and recurring options in there. And again, that goes towards helping us stay on the radio show and helping promote our show. And we're gonna keep talking about the bank stuff. We're gonna get to some of the comments. Again, I do want to get to Glass-Steagall thing and separating out savings versus investment type of banks. And again, whether or not private insurance can. Well, we'll start with that. We'll start with the private insurance thing, and then we'll get to the regulation. Do we need more regulation, Tim?
We need something, and we need when it's a
statist.
Let's save it for the show. When it's a clear case of mismanagement, we have to have a mechanism that punishes these jokers. And I don't know that SVB meets that requirement just yet, but they have certain priorities that I don't think.
Yeah, and we can also talk about like punishment versus preemptive regulation, right? And then what kind of incentives either of those creates.
Regulations are shrewd people love regulations. They make bank off of them.
Yeah, they do. All right, so we'll head back in just a couple seconds and do this. Let's see if my music can work this time.
Yeah, let's do that. I like the music intro. That's good stuff.
Welcome back to A Free Solution. I'm Kevin Wilson, your host today, joined by Tim, the Freedom Variant O'Connor.
I'm here, and we are going to solve the banking crisis's problems with more freedom.
More freedom. That's right. More freedom. That's always the answer. So we were talking about before the break, like, what are some ways to deal with the specific problem of should we be bailing out the businesses again, and what it is. And I'm very sympathetic to this, and I understand like why this is, and I imagine there's got to be some market for this already, right? Like for most banks, for most businesses, it would probably be a relatively low insurance risk to say yes. Like if you regularly have like this amount of money in your operations account, right? And we can expect this range of however many hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars to be in this account at any given time, above the $250,000 limit that the FDIC insures, that some insurance company could say, yes, we'll insure that money, that variable amount of money for like whatever rate. And that businesses might be interested in doing that. Yeah. Because it's not like this happens that often.
Isn't this a case of the government kind of preventing or offering coverage for a minor expense that a bank would face through regulation, right? Like instead of the bank having to risk manage its own situation, the government says, we got you. Don't worry about it. Like you do what you got to do. And
that's the moral hazard part of it, right? It's, and again, it can create incentives for them engaging in more risky behavior. Because again, their risk is going to be socialized. They're going to get bailed out. They're going to get helped. They're not going to really let down those businesses because the government's going to step in and make everyone whole. Well, great. What's the incentive to not engage in that risky behavior or in that mismanagement or in that? So I mean, there are legal consequences. I would suspect of selling a bunch of stock right before.
I hope so. Kevin, history has shown that if they file the right piece of paper at the right piece of time in the right time frame with the right lawyer, that they get away with this garbage.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, just gotta.
Yeah, that's the situation.
They disclose it. I mean, that's what happens sometimes. Like, oh no, this is a planned sale that we put in 6 months ago or whatever, right? Like,
yeah, They can even say we're thinking about selling this next quarter. If I understand it correctly, and they could just put that piece of paper in at the beginning of the previous quarter and just say we're thinking about selling 1 million shares. We're thinking about selling 1 million shares. We may execute it on or around this date. and then
Yeah.
either they do or they don't, and it's okay. They just let it wash out. There's no consequences either way, and so that system needs to be reformed in a way. There's a certain level of inherent dishonesty in that. These guys got to get there's they saw it coming, and they 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 bailed themselves out ahead of time, as always.
Yeah. And so speaking of that and regulating that type of behavior, we had gotten a comment from John on YouTube, from our friend and former co-host of A Free Solution. He says that, as Larry Sharp said on his show today, Sharp Way Show, also on WYSL, bring back Glass Steagall. And then he clarifies savings and loans were separate from investment banks. Do we need to strengthen those types of regulations, Tim?
I think the issue with any kind of regulation is that it always creates a wormhole. And look, I'm going to go off the rails a little bit, but Airbnb saw the increasing zoning, and they drove a train through it. And so now they're the largest provider of housing in the United States. We saw it in 2008 with the loans that were being made because of certain community reinvestment acts that ostensibly, look, guys, I think these things are good ideas. Like, we shouldn't discriminate, okay? But they were able to incentivize bad loans because the government had their back, and that's a reality that we have to face.
Right.
Okay, so regulations aren't the answer. Freedom is the answer, as Kevin said. Like, look, let's make people pay for insurance on their money. Let's make these banks certify this money in cooperation with insurance companies. And guys, I hate insurance companies, okay? But one of the reasons why I hate insurance companies is because the government gives them such cushy deals, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Like, if they really had to do what they were supposed to do, the world could be a better place, I think. What do you think? I feel like we get off that libertarian rails. People are just like, you guys are crazy. You can't turn this all over to the free market. They're gonna turn it into the United States of sweatshop workers. Like, that's what we're going to be. So I don't know. Maybe people are right.
No, well, no, I don't think they're right. And again, something to keep in mind is that all these things is that it all has consequences, right? Like, and we've talked about this, that a lot of companies are amoral. Again, not immoral, not moral, amoral. They exist to make money, and that has good things and bad things about that, right? And banks are certainly a creature of that system. And so, like, what do you have when you separate savings and loans stuff from investment banks, and you have fewer opportunities for banks to make money with the money that you give them in savings? It's that, well, they'll do different things. Like, they'll charge you for holding accounts. They'll reintroduce account fees. They're going to make that money somehow, right? They will find ways to do that. They'll charge you for the accounts, or they will introduce new fees, which people have seen all sorts of that. Like, when some of the new regulation came out after 2008, there's a lot of banks who are increasing fees for overdrafts, and that ended up falling disproportionately on poor people. But they had created restrictions on their activities, and they wanted to make that money up somehow. So that's what they did. And that's, you have to understand, like, that's going to be the nature of, like, a system where we have some level of profit, and that system where we have some level of profit provides immense amount of good things, because people are willing to take their money and put it in sometimes risky ventures, and sometimes that's good. The only thing I'm asking for in that situation is that there's consequences when the risk doesn't work out, right? For the people who choose to make that risk. And I said, I'm more sympathetic to the folks who are just like, I had my operating, account in this bank, and they took my money in a way that I didn't anticipate, and gambled it away. And that's not good.
Yeah.
They should face consequences for that. But for like the venture capitalists, for the bankers who are investing in businesses, and a lot of small businesses are risky, they should be able to make money off of taking that risk. And it is a good thing for a business to have easier access to capital, because then they can take that personal risk too of starting a business and doing something cool for the community that might not be there absent the ability of a financial institution to find and use that money.
Yeah. Let me hit you with one that I've always wanted to discuss. Isn't the current system of banking, with the government backing people up, and unlimited deposit insurance because of it is morally correct to protect people that are working for companies. But isn't it simply too safe? Isn't it too incentivized for them to hold vast sums of money in a banking stock portfolio style system? Shouldn't there be some incentive for that money to go out to the public? Guys like me, there were times when I was looking for money, and there's not that I am anymore, but like there were times when I was looking for money where everybody's money was safer in the bank. Everybody's money was safer in stocks. They were going to get a good return on it. Anything I wanted to do was too high of a risk or came at too high of a cost. So I'd like to see some more risk for those on those big pools of money. If you understand what I'm saying, it's kind of an abstract concept, but it's something I'd like to talk about
Right.
a little
So I
bit.
mean, like there's also some incentive to like there's a limit to the risk, and the type of people that they're willing to take risks on are usually like other big players who already have money and wealth and resources, not
Exactly.
the small guy who is just starting out and starting a business. And yeah,
The more creative financing for smaller businesses would be appreciated, and it's almost like the system disincentivizes that, makes it practically impossible. There's
yeah,
no
and well, and what ends up happening too is like that more kind of creative grassroots finance systems like can get caught up in the regulation that's meant for like these massive corporations, these national banks, and these regional banks, which face the criticism in this situation is they face somewhat less scrutiny and regulation than like the national level banks, right? Because they figured
yeah.
the systematic risk was less. They're subject to a little bit less risk, and now people are going to be re-examining that. But like even when you have like micro lending programs, and there's sometimes these programs run through like cities or just run through like like Kickstarter type of deals, right? Like
Right.
those can sometimes run into challenges in part because of regulations meant to lessen the risk of systematic failure and not meant to regulate the risk taking in a microfunding program for a business.
Well, it's amazing that you caught on to the concept that I was talking about that quickly. So that gives me hope that we'll be able to wake more people up to this possibility. So do you feel like we have time to talk about a couple other things, or should we keep traveling
We
down this?
we got like 5 minutes, so if you want to, I mean,
I've
go
got a
ahead.
hot one, man. That's
All
gonna
right, you tell me about it. You got
maybe
five
fire up our
minutes.
audience. It's not the drone, the Russian jet. The Russian jet, though, guys, just so you know, a Russian jet absolutely went out of its way and collided with a drone over the Caspian Sea.
Was that? Is that? I
It
didn't get to read the story. The jet was just like
just
drone. I'm gonna get it. Like, what?
just drove right into it, man. It's like
Bold
it's
move.
kind of hilarious. But what the one that has a lot of interest to me that I ran across this story, a Dutch court, Kevin, has convicted a man for, and guys, this has elements of sex in it. This has elements of intrigue. This guy removed his condom while having sex with a lady, and he was convicted of stealthing and now has to pay a fine of like about $1,073 after a multi-year court case.
You shouldn't do that.
You should not, guys. I'm telling you what, society should be based on consent. Sexual relations should be based on consent. And doing something as uncool as that is a
Yeah,
problem.
isn't that cool? You should face consequences. I don't know. I think I'm with the Dutch government on this one.
It's an interesting deal. I'm not sure kind of how. First of all, how did they figure it out? Second of all, like it's an amazing situation. I didn't even realize it was hitting the courts and the legal system, but there are laws popping up all over the country about stealthing. Now, unfortunately, the guy was I'm not sure if it's unfortunate, but the guy was also charged with rape at the same time because removing the condom was equated with rape. Luckily, I think on this, at least for this guy, that was not furthered in the courtroom. That charge was dropped. There was an agreement to have consensual relations.
Yeah, so just part of it. I don't know. I'm fine with that dude facing some consequences.
Did I catch you off guard with that one? I kind of
Yeah, you did. Tim, you always keep me on my toes because I never know where the conversations are gonna go. I'm just, all right, cool. I just gotta be ready for it. I just gotta. This show is sometimes improv. I've just got to yes and
you just got to be like,
roll with it.
I know occasionally it's like, all right, I need about 30 seconds to think this over. So what am I going to do? Tim's brain will fire off in several different directions at once. But I ran across that one right before the show, and I thought we should talk about this because our society and all societies work better when they're based on consent. And
Yeah.
being a dirty dog is not cool. But like, I just wanted to get your take on it, and I think you came down on this basically the same side I did.
He was a dirty dog, and he faced consequences. Should
Try to
it's
jazz up
something.
the show with some sex too, you know.
Yeah, just what the radio show wants. That's I'm sure,
I just,
they'll be
just
thrilled about
radio
that.
station. They're gonna call me. Bob is gonna call me and thank me for my contributions
That's
this week.
right, exactly. But and
It
yeah, I
was
mean,
actually Patricia. It was actually a crime like that. This guy got charged with. It wasn't a. It was, but he does have to pay damages. So I believe maybe you are right. Maybe it was a simple tort.
yeah, tort
violation.
law. Patricia on Facebook has tort law, yeah or nay. So yeah, it's it's if there's kind of civil damages too, could be. And the court system's good for that because sometimes things don't neatly fall into crime beyond the shadow of a doubt, but there's still compensation that's appropriate. But anywho, we have to get going on the radio show part. We can continue on the online part. So again, if you're listening on the radio, sometimes we talk a little bit extra in the online piece. Go into some extra topics. Make sure you subscribe. A Free Solution podcasts, YouTube, Facebook, the Tim O'Connor pages, the Kevin Wilson pages, all those pages. Follow them all of them. All right. Thanks again for joining us here on A Free Solution. Have a wonderful night, WYSL audience. Take care. All right, we're out. These days, I got to remember to play the music for the end too.
The kicker, the end kicker, bumper.
Yeah, I got this
Ooh,
one right here.
That's pretty sweet.
So it goes out over the radio. And
I
then,
remember Enron. Do you remember Enron?
Free Solution.
Sorry, yeah, I'm just messing with my tunes here. Enron, sort of. There was I mean, that was a long time ago.
It was a while ago
when that happened. It was 2000?
Around 2000. It was like an oil kind of company, but they got into derivative markets, and they were like, you know, the smartest guys in the room, and blah 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 blah. And it was a personality cult, and actually, that was something I wanted to talk about today on the show. We see these personality cults that pop up. Enron was a personality cult, and check it out though. The guys from Enron all got convicted, all went to jail, all had their convictions subsequently overturned and were released from jail. Like, they didn't break any laws, even though they were convicted. Well, it's hard to say. Their convictions were overturned. They were certainly accused of breaking a lot of laws, but they basically were exonerated down the road. Like, none of them ended up staying in jail, and a lot of them had their conviction records expunged. So there was some derivative market trading that they did, and they were definitely capitalizing on the fact that they had money, and they were making money off of having money, and they're supposed to be in the like oil production business, you know.
Yeah, I know that some sort of energy company. I know that. It's gonna I know a little bit about that, but yeah, I don't know. To me, it's they were engaging in some shady activity, and I think one of the legitimate functions of government is the prevention, or at least the making whole of people who are engaged in fraud, right? Like if a company is engaging in shady, fraudulent activity and misusing investor money or misusing government money or whatever, right? Or whatever the situation may be, I think there's a legitimate.
We need to have a place to arbitrate fraud, right? Like, if you defraud me, I am due compensation. Two of the Enron guys died in prison. I forgot about that. I believe that is accurate. There is a personality cult around these banks, the Silicon Valley Bank. There's a personality cult around Signature Bank. That doesn't mean that they're necessarily bad banks per se, but anytime I feel as though the business becomes, on any level, serving something other than their customers and serving anything other than making money, there comes into play a moral hazard that allows sharks to swim through the regulations and make for a problem. Does that make sense, Kevin?
Maybe. I mean, it can definitely trend in that direction. Personality, having CEOs and executives that have a personality can be part of a positive branding experience. I think that there was a time when that was a benefit for someone like Elon Musk, right? Like
Sure. But
he
he's a
was an
credit
innovator,
farmer.
he was out there, he was fun, he was quirky, right? And
Right.
that's all fun and games until you start losing money.
Right. But he's a credit farmer, so he'll never lose money. Like he cuts the best deals for big businesses that I've ever seen.
Yeah.
They give him money to come to town. So that is a personality cult. It doesn't mean he's not necessarily delivering goods and services, but I don't know if you probably, this is before your time, but Peter Lynch, the founder of Magellan Fund, which back in the day that was the quintessential mutual fund to invest in. He wrote a few books on how to find winning stocks, and he was really, really, really good at it. And so one of the things that he did a couple of chapters on was warning people about personality cults, where everybody is actually just invested in the personality of the CEO and they don't have a real freaking business model to back it up. And
No, sure.
I see elements in our society every day of we are jumping from one personality cult to another personality cult. Guys, you Trump fans, that's a personality cult. You Democrats, it's harder to accuse you of being in a personality cult, but you're in a different kind of cult. And believe me, you're in a freaking cult because you're
I
absolutely
mean,
crazy.
like Obama was a bit. He got a bit culty.
He was a
It is-
personality, right? It would
yeah,
be easier to say he was a personality cult for the
yeah,
Democrats.
like Joe Biden is not that guy. Like no
No.
one's putting like okay, not no one. There are people making Dark Brandon t-shirts, but there's way more. Like there is still I can still go buy like an Obama like t-shirt or purse and whatnot like at the public market in Rochester. People still sell that stuff. Like
Right, right. So
no
that's
one's
a personality cult, guys, for sure.
yeah. It's he's
You Putin fans, you're a personality cult. Like it's a personality cult, sometimes even we go back into history and we find like personality cults that survive forever, and we talk about people that were like really good or really bad, and all they really had was a personality cult. Karl Marx, who this is the anniversary of his birthday or death day, actually.
yeah.
There was a little bit of a personality cult there.
Maybe. I mean, like it could happen. Like you're framing it that way, as if it's a negative thing. Like people like Ron Paul have to have their personality cult. Like for better or worse, like people like are attracted to a certain charisma or ideas or whatever, and like that. In a positive spin, it's charisma and leadership, and in a negative spin, it's personality cult, right? And it's just a matter of like, does that personality cult ultimately interfere with the goals that like the personality was built to advance, right? And if they're still advancing those goals and those goals are worthwhile, then great. If it's either interfering with those goals or driving towards a negative end, like
Yeah.
Hitler personality cult, like
Lee
yeah,
Iacocca was
that's
a
bad.
personality cult. Is that who you're talking about, Steve? Lee Iacocca was the guy that bailed out Chrysler. Got the government to bail out Chrysler the first time they failed, and he definitely got to be a personality cult until everybody was like, you know what, we're kind of done with you, and he was still talking, and people finally stopped listening to him.
Yeah, no, that's the thing.
Shelley,
It's
I'm
a
sorry,
big.
Steve, Shelley.
Yeah,
my bad.
Shelly on YouTube talking about the GMC stuff, but yeah, no, that can definitely be a thing. And there's a lot of people getting the leadership position, and it's because people like them sometimes. Like that's what it is. It's not about like competence or good decision making all the time. Sometimes, a lot of times it is, but sometimes it's just people like them.
Yeah, what a shame, honestly.
Yeah, that's how it goes.
When I compare the cult of like a personality cult to the cult of people that it seem to and this is going to be offensive, but seem to misunderstand the purpose of the Constitution and worshiping a document versus being involved in a personality cult. I do like the personality cult associated with the Constitution better than I like an average personality cult where we worship somebody like Hitler or Marx or Obama or Trump. Like I like that better because it provides a more consistent coherency. But I do want to remind everybody that there's problems with the Constitution too, like the 16th Amendment, the 17th Amendment. These things are an abrogation of our rights. The Bill of Rights is pretty good. That would be a good document cult to be a part of. What do you think about that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, you could. There's lots of those too. I mean, I am generally a fan of the Constitution. You're not a fan of the 17th Amendment? Come on.
Which one's this? Maybe I might have it wrong.
Yeah. You threw out the 17th Amendment. Well, it's fine. It's the one allowing for the direct election of U.S. senators.
Oh,
16th the
16th is the taxation one, right?
Yeah, and then 18th was alcohol prohibition. You don't have strong feelings on the direct election of U.S. senators?
I don't have. No, I don't care. We're supposed to be a
Should our state legislature be able to select them?
Yeah, I guess that would be bad. I don't know. Well, look at what New York State has given us. I'm not happy with that. So, like, how do I make a positive argument for the 17th Amendment when Chuck Schumer and Kirsten Gillibrand are my state senators?
Yeah, I mean, we'd probably just end up with them anyway. They repealed the 17th today. Like, oh yeah, like what Chuck Schumer, he's our guy. It's
a fair point though. You're making a fair point. At least we can say that they were duly elected, even though I think that they're horrible. Biden has new washing machine regulations coming out, Kevin.
Oh, he does. Is he going to make washing machines worse? Because
he is. As a matter of fact, he is going to make new washing machines even worse than the worser ones that we already have now. Okay, like they're going to use even less water. They're going to run even longer, and they're setting new efficiency standards, targeting Americans washing their clothes. And the manufacturers of washing machines are like, okay, why don't we just make people poorer and smellier and force them to buy new junk every couple of years? They're just like, this is not a good idea.
No, I mean, some of the like beefy, I've been watching like appliance TikTok a little bit. Some of the like the beefy old top loaders, like apparently is the way to go. I got like a high efficiency front load washer, and I don't really like it.
Medea is the South Korean manufacturer of washing machines and microwave ovens. And my washing machine, the first one I got didn't work right. I was like, oh man, no, now what? But I took it back. They gave me a new one. And I'll tell you what, I can load this thing. It washes so much clothes. I can fill the whole tub with water. Don't tell anybody. Okay. Like I can have a cycle or two that I can fill the entire thing with water. It's a miracle. It has brought back my faith in humanity, you South Koreans. Thank you very much. They found a way around the rules, because the normal cycle is like your normal dry couple gallons of water. Your clothes barely get wet, whatever, you know. But so now we got that to look forward to. And guys, on the inflation front, there is some interesting news. One way to really fight inflation, besides raising interest rates and making the middle class incredibly poor, is to lower energy costs. And to that note, guess what? Guess who authorized the much debated? Oh, I lost it. I had so many. I have so many windows open, Kevin. You wouldn't even. They have authorized some drilling in Alaska, guys. It's a big deal. They're going to open up some new oil fields. They're going to throw in a pipeline. It's going to be awesome. Even Chuck Schumer's mad at Joe Biden for that one.
Yeah, I saw that. And yeah, no, it's interesting, and it's a weird thing because a bunch of lefties are mad about it. And I heard from some of my friends about this too, but like weirdly enough, like a lot of the indigenous people in that area are like, no, actually we're okay with this. We think it's probably going to be on net good.
They hunt near them. Like, look, it's a boon for like a coral reef, guys. It's a boon for like the life animal production there. It keeps things a little bit warmer for them in the winter. They all use it as shelter. Pipelines in Alaska are a good thing. It needs some infrastructure.
Yeah.
Oil is still a part of our economy. I like solar. I build solar. I like it, guys. Like, but oil's still part of what we got to do, man.
Yeah, it is what it is. And again, if we can, in the meantime, set up a a somewhat self-sustaining oil infrastructure as we like build into like new technologies that are going to be less reliant on fossil fuels, great. And if we can do it without having to buy like Russian and Saudi oil, then even
Oh,
better.
it would be
Like,
great. And in times of turmoil, drill, baby, drill.
yeah,
I
like,
never felt like we should scale. I'm fine with a lot of the programs to encourage people to use solar. I'm fine with them. Big oil bought lots of regulations that benefited them throughout the years. We don't even know the extent of them.
yeah, it's
We don't
huge.
even know how much the government A allowed, B subsidized, and C encouraged oil companies to produce oil. We don't even know the extent of it. Okay, um, so I'm okay with all the programs that are like, hey, buy solar, hey, do this, hey, do that. We're gonna help you out. I'm okay with all of that. But I'm very okay with excess supply of energy. That is a future that our children can look forward to. I, it doesn't darken. Green energy right now is darkening the future of it. It's telling everybody you've got to learn to
Yeah.
live with less. I
Well,
don't think that
and
that's
like
okay.
we've talked about like some of the negative growth people, and like I'm fine with like some environmental folks, but like the negative growth ones, the ones who like want to see increased poverty, less access to energy, like a shrinking economy, like those guys are terrible. Like people are getting mad at like Greta Thunberg right now because she's like, yeah, actually maybe we should keep the nuclear on for a little bit, and they're like, oh my goodness. Yeah, if you don't want to like have people freezing to death in Europe, like you need other solutions. You either burn the coal or you turn on the nuclear plants or you let people freeze. Like those are the three options right
Those are
now.
your
You got to do
freaking
one of
choices,
those.
psycho.
And the green folks are like, yeah, I guess people are just gonna have to die. You got too many. All
It
right, yeah, like so that
well, that's the problem with the World Economic Forum. They do come across as Malthusians. They do come across as let's let everyone else be poorer than us and poorer moving into the future. And I think that's where they lose a lot of people.
yeah. Speaking of not using modern technology, Brian says I'd like to go back to the old ringer washer like my grandmother had. Brian, you go ahead, man. No one's
Do it,
stopping you.
bro.
You're
Do
like
it.
do your thing and hang the wash out on the clothesline. Go for it. Green
Yeah,
solar
man. We
energy. Go.
support that.
No one is stopping you. In fact, you should be free to do all that. Like I had to look up what the ringer washer is. Like, is that the way I think it is? And I looked it up. There's some for sale. It's
They're out
$350 if
there.
you want to buy it. Yeah,
They're out
you
there,
get one.
man. I just threw one away. It was not in good shape. I was like thinking about fixing it up because it was an old Maytag and like making it look cool. And
Yeah.
then I'm like, you know what? I'm never going to do that. So I threw it away. It's part of my hoarding disease. I try to collect things that I'm going to
Well, it's good
fix
you
up
got rid
later.
of it. So
Yeah, but I did.
that's
I
the
did get
important
rid
part.
of it. It's gone. It's not. It doesn't
Yeah.
exist anymore. Scrap. Better living through shivering.
That's
Stephen
Steve
Becker.
Becker on Facebook. Yeah.
I
How's it
love
going?
it. So the future has brightened up just a little bit. We are going to drill in Alaska.
Yeah. And
Shelley
listen
asked a
to
question.
Shelly, I'm looking for a bicycle generator. Anyone know where to find one already assembled? So I looked into this stuff because like we got one of those like big like exercise bikes with like the heavy steel flywheel, right? And I was like, oh man, like wouldn't it be neat if this was like a generator? It doesn't produce that much power. Like I looked into like how much power it takes to produce like to do like anything. Like they had like an Olympic level like speed cyclists try to ride a bicycle to power a toaster and he could not do it. He could not make one piece of toast.
Yeah, that's not going to work.
It just
It,
like yeah.
look, I'm telling you that creating heat with electric we are nowhere near creating enough heat with electric to make switching to an all electric society feasible.
Yeah.
It takes up too much watts or volts or however you want to
Yeah.
calculate it. It takes up too much power. We've got to have other sources of heat, or we're all going to be moving south, all of us. Here we go. Let's do this. Patricia says Senator Charles E. Schumer still owes me a public apology. Somewhere he misgendered her in an email or something like. Look, as far as I'm concerned, that guy owes the entire freaking world an apology. He's a psychopath. That's it. My favorite was Diane Sayer calling him Killer Chuck when he was all bragging about how cool he was, and she's just like, he's like, yeah, they nicknamed me Killer Chuck, and she just happened to be at this event, and he had been at an event earlier in the day where, like, I guess it was like rap music was going on, and they nicknamed him Killer Chuck. And she's like, "No, you are a killer. It's the right nickname." And she got bounced out on her head. It was pretty funny.
All right.
You're like, all right, the things that interest you, Tim, I have a hard time keeping up with. So,
Killer Chuck.
Yep. It's been a long show, though, guys.
Yeah, that's what it is. I'm gonna share a link to that cycling thing on. Shelly, I'm assuming you're on the free solution YouTube.
Yeah.
Or is it Shelly? Or is it?
I think it was Shelly.
Yeah, Shelly. Yeah. But this dude, like, he's far more jacked than I am, and I could not couldn't make a piece of toast.
I am thinking about getting a little windmill type thing. They have them that spin in circles, so it doesn't matter what direction the wind comes from.
Yeah, I've seen some of those. I've thought about that. Like, like I have like a pretty strong prevailing wind because there's a big open field next to my house too, and like, like it's not gonna power my own house, but especially if I eventually invest in some batteries, like it might get a little solar, get a little windmill going, for the winter time. Like,
a couple panels of solar would charge a lot of batteries if you set up a charging station off of them. All the batteries you use in your house, all your phone batteries, and then as you get more battery appliances, which I think seems to be the wave of the future, right? Like a little battery vacuum, a little like
I got one of those too, battery vacuum.
You could have a little system that keeps them charged all the time.
Yeah. And then they're going to have Wi-Fi charging too, so you don't have to plug it in or nothing. It just charges.
Because that doesn't use a ton of electric either. So there's lots of things that we can offload to green energy systems for sure.
Yeah.
I can see it's a time where we have separate power systems in our house just for charging all of our batteries. And then even you could probably even do most of your lighting off of that stuff. Like that, especially with LED.
We just disconnect from the utility system altogether, and then you don't have to worry about them wasting money putting people in hotels in your town because you're off the grid. You ain't paying for it anymore. It's all yours. Shows come first, full circle, Tim.
I love it. That would be great. I would love it.
That's it. I mean, legit, like that's the libertarian like vision. Like, I would love to have like somewhat independent power systems if you want to. Like that could be a thing, and have it be efficient enough and scalable enough to work. Like the problem is right now it's out of reach for most people, and it's not reliable enough. So, but it's getting there.
It is. I told you I explored on how to make my own nuclear reactor, right? Like, I think that's the way to go.
Tim's gonna start experimenting in his backyard, and
I got to get my iodine tablets first, but I'm thinking about it.
Good plan. Just get a little, just a little SMR, just for you and the family. Just maybe a couple neighbors.
If it works, I mean, we'll have to get there. Who knows? I think I'll just do solar panels. I'll buy a different piece of property and put up solar panels. My place does not work for solar.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, it only sort of works for mine too. Because I got a bunch of nice trees that keep my house nice and shady in the summertime, and I like that. Also, I can't touch them because they're the city's trees, but wouldn't want to cut those down just to have a little bit more solar. It keeps I don't have AC. It keeps my house much cooler, but so I'm like, I get a little wind thing. Like today, like right now, like getting pretty consistent wind against my house.
I have, because I live next to a lake. I have a crosswind that comes across, compresses between my house and my neighbor's house, dumps leaves on my doorstep every single day of the year. Like, but if I had a little windmill, I'd feel better about all those leaves I'm tripping over.
Yeah, a little bit of that. All right. Anyway, won't spend the next hour talking about off the grid living, but so I think we're gonna call it a night.
Yeah.
Been almost an hour and a half now. So thanks everyone for listening. Appreciate you all being here. I'll talk to you next week.
Thanks everybody.